So good day once again, and welcome to another session on research method. For today, we will talk about the guide questions that will help you in the critical analysis of your research output. So I'll be discussing with you guide questions that you will need in the assessment of your report so that you will know what will be the overall uh, quality of your respective research reports. So allow me to begin by looking at some of the requirements relative to the title of the investigation. The first has to do with the writing of the title, and it should be as clear and concise as possible. So the first question is it clear and concise? So when we talk about title, it is very significant because it is the very first thing that the readers would see in your report, and the title should give uh, an an insight on what the report is all about. So it should be clear and concise, and observing the principle of brevity, it should be consist of about 10 to 20 succinct words. So when I say succinct, it will be referring to the main words or terms that are reflected in the title. Okay, so that's the first. Second is, does it promise no more than the study can provide? It should not be. It should not be. Uh, should not be vague. It should give some hints on the contents of the report, and it should be reflected in the title, the variables and other informations that are necessary, um, and that are important relative to this to the research report. Okay, so that's for the title of the investigation. So there are two things that you will note of. Number one, um, is it clear and concise? And number two, does it promise no more than the study can provide? So that's for the title. Now we move on to the problem. So the problem would include the different subtopics in the first chapter. So if you will have to recall, the problem and its background chapter will deal with the following subtopics. We have rationale, we have conceptual or theoretical framework, we have statement of the problem, assumptions, hypotheses, we have scope and delimitation, significance of the study, and then we have definition of terms. So the problem, as reflected in the rationale, should be clearly stated. Okay? Um, Clearly stated in and observing deductive reasoning. So meaning that we begin with the macro perspective or discussion of the problem, and then leading you to a more specific micro discussion of the local or institutional level. In so far as the statement of the problem is concerned, as it is written in two parts, the SOP for the general problem statement should answer two things. So the first is, what is the study all about? And then number two, why are you doing this study? Okay, so it should be clear. And it is to be supported by specific problems, okay, that will back you up in your research objective. So is it properly delimited? So this would uh, refer to uh, this would refer to the scope of the study and the delimitation. So it will it should discuss, okay, it should discuss It should discuss the bounds as well as the limits of your study. So that's for the problem statement. And then we have is its significance recognized? So you have part of the significance of the study, the benefits that will be derived by certain sectors. Okay, and note that for the significance of the study, it should be with reference to uh, the benefits that the study itself will yield on certain sectors or groups. Okay, so I'd like to repeat that. So we're talking about the value of the study or the results of the study. Okay, to some groups or sectors. Then number four are specific questions raised. Hypothesis clearly stated. So there are two things that I'd like to discuss here in. So the first um, refers to the formulation of sub-problems, which should be organized uh, or following the order as follows. So we begin with the factual questions. So factual questions are questions uh, that will elicit, okay, facts, while the second, analytical questions, okay, are those that will require analysis, okay, and analysis may be in the form of quantitative or qualitative analysis. So for quantitative, it can be in so far as uh, descriptive statistics or aided by descriptive statistics or inferential statistics. Then we have hypothesis. So hypothesis is only required when the study uh, is all about it's all about correlation, association, or comparison and the like. Okay, so that's for hypothesis. So only the groups that are into association study or correlation study, okay, that will be required to have part of the first chapter or the problem and its background hypothesis, which will be stated in its null form. Then we have assumptions, limitations, and delimitations. So assumptions is uh, for the parameters of your study. It's that which you will have as benchmarks or as uh, uh, as parameters. Okay, um, in ensuring that validity or reliability is attained. Okay, so we have it on the basis of number one, the qualifications of the participants of the study should not be in question, and that it should be made part of the assumptions. Number two, um, the validity and reliability of the instrument. Then number three, we have the objectivity of the responses of the respondents, or the veracity of the documents or the data that were taken from documents or written outputs. And then we have also in terms of uh, the uh, the the potential use, okay, of any outputs that you have part of your set of sub problems. Okay, and then we have limitations and delimitations, which I already have initially discussed. But here is a more specific discussion on the itemization of the scope and the delimitations or the boundaries of the study. So it will set the limits for your study. And then we have the terms to be defined. Always remember this, okay? And I'd like to point it out that for the terms to be defined in the first chapter, it will be only for the terms that are reflected in the title and the statement of the problem. Please take note of this. So you begin with the most important as reflected in the title, and then look into what other terms are introduced in the statement of the problem. Only these terms, okay, that uh, are to be defined, okay, part of the definition of terms, okay, in the first chapter. So we now proceed to the review of related literature and studies. Okay, so talking about your reviewed related literature, so the first question is it adequately covered? What do we mean by is it adequately covered? So meaning let's look into what we have part of our related literature, and so that you can figure out whether it's adequate or not. We have it in terms of what you identified for themes, because obviously the themes are based on the title and the statement of the problem. Again, the themes should be those that are reflected in the title and the statement of the problem. Okay, just to ensure that you adequately cover, okay, the literature that will back you up in your analysis and interpretation later. Are important findings noted? Okay, that's noted. Are important findings noted? Or was it only merely uh, presentation of what you have reviewed? You should, okay, aside from presenting what you have reviewed, highlight, okay, to take note of the findings, especially for the related studies part, okay, especially for the related studies part. And then, is it well organized? Again, talking about thematic presentation, more or less it will ensure organized discussion. However, you will still, okay, organize your reviewed literature, okay, under each theme and in the two sections. Okay, the two sections that I'm referring to are: number one, we have the conceptual literature section, and then we have the research literature section. And then is an effective summary provided. That summary that is mentioned here, that is with reference to your synthesis. So the synthesis should summarize, okay, what you have reviewed for literature, for related literature. Okay, so that will be for the reviewed literature in chapter 2. Then we have procedures used for the third chapter. Okay, so talking about the procedures, is the research design described in detail? Okay, so you need to have a full account of what the design is all about, and you need to justify its adequacy. So when we say it's adequate, okay, it should be answering uh, the main problem statement, and so with the sub problems. Are the samples described? Okay, so you will need to have a section also that will talk about your samples if you are doing a survey. If you are doing an assessment study, you will need to also describe your key informants. If you are doing a study that is concerned with participants, then you will need to describe your participants. For example, uh, accountancy students and their academic performance as reflected in their grades. So they are not respondents because they don't respond to questions, but they are the subjects, okay, meaning the participants that you will have for the study, okay, based on the grades that they have earned in their different subjects. Are relevant variables recognized? Okay, so it is important to be clear with all these variables because variables are meant to be measured fully. And these are the reasons why you're having this study. So the variables should be recognizable. Are the appropriate controls provided? So did you take into account all the factors that may influence, and that you have also undertaken some measures to put to its minimum the influence of these controls? Are data gathering instruments appropriate? Okay, so the appropriateness of the instruments is very important because the type of data and the quality of the data that you will gather will depend to a great extent on the the data gathering tool that you will use. Okay, such that is why if you are doing a survey, so you will be using what we refer to as survey questionnaire, and then follow it up with an interview. Therefore, it will be aided by interview guide for data gathering tool. Now, for assessment, so obviously, primarily what you will need to have is interview guide or interview schedule, so that you will be able to have uh, guide in the conduct of the interview or focus group discussion, as the case may be. Are validity and reliability established? This will be for instruments like questionnaire, okay, that are researcher formulated. So if the questionnaire is formulated purposely for this study by the researchers, you will need to establish the validity and reliability of the data gathering instruments. And is the statistical treatment appropriate? Okay. So if we are talking about correlation, then we will need to determine whether the data or the data sets, okay, are uh, the data sets are normally distributed, or what scale what are the types of scales of data that are generated in the study. So uh, you will need to know all this in order for you to be able to identify properly and appropriately the statistical treatment. So there are two types of uh, inferential statistics. We have the parametric and the non-parametric. So if, for example, there are categorical datas, uh, part of the set of data that will be uh, inputted in the test of significance of difference, then we go for the non-parametric type. But if the data uh, is um either interval or ratio, then we uh, would uh, choose, okay, the parametric type. Like for example, we have the Pearson product moment of coefficient of correlation. Okay. And then data analysis. So are the tables and graphs appropriately used? Remember, we you will need to know whether the tables and graphs, okay, are properly presented, okay, and uh, or that these tables and graphs will support your research objective. So is textual discussion clear and concise? So uh, it should be uh, it should be observing, okay, clarity, okay, and comprehensiveness in the uh, textual discussion. So is the analysis of data relationships logical and perceptive? Okay, and is the statistical analysis accurately interpreted? So insofar as interpretation is concerned, always remember the three levels of interpretation. Number one, we have table or graphical reading. That's number one. Number two, we have inferencing or implication. And then number three, we have corroboration or cross-referencing. I'd like to emphasize that in order to make your interpretation more scholarly, you should uh, have all these three, especially the third one, the cross-referencing or corroboration, be part of your interpretation. So what is cross-referencing and corroboration again? Cross-referencing is when you refer the findings of your study to the previous findings as you have reviewed in literature. So you will need to corroborate, meaning you will need uh, to interpret with reference to the uh, previous, okay, findings. Okay, so I will need to uh, you will need to have part of your chapter 4 for interpretation purposes mention of the different literature or the sources, okay, uh, of the related literature, okay, as you do the interpretation in the fourth chapter. So you will need to have all that you have reviewed part of your chapter 4. I said all, okay? So you don't place anything in chapter 2 if it is not after all related. Kaya nga, that is why your chapter 2 is entitled Review of Related Literature. All that you place there in that second chapter will uh, also be mentioned in your chapter 4. And then we have summary and conclusion. So is the problem restated, but we don't give much of attention anymore on this. We just have the findings concisely presented. Okay, so that the findings part of the fifth chapter should uh, have data, should have a set of significant findings to correspond with each sub problem. So I'd like to repeat that the findings uh, should itemize, okay, the highlights or results of the study, okay, uh, by sub problem, okay, by sub problem, and as much as possible in bullets, okay, as much as possible in bullets. Now, is the analysis objective? Okay, so this one's for the analysis because the analysis is very essential in coming up with the conclusion. So the conclusion, by the way, is the generalization that you will draw from the set of findings, and therefore these findings should be objectively analyzed. Okay, and of course, the conclusions are very important because this will be the basis for your recommendations. All right. So these are the set of guide questions that will help you assess the quality of your work. I'd like that you have a session, uh, a session where all the members of the group are present and and uh, review, okay, collegially, okay, your output. Okay, so that's about it for today for the questions, okay, that will help you assess your work. So thank you and God bless everyone.